What's going on, y'all? Let's Be Real podcast, episode 8. Man, we're back. Look, got a lot to cover today. Obviously, going over some of the bigger games in week 8. We're going to look ahead to week 9. We'll obviously go through our top 5, our bets, and then, like we did last week, starting to sprinkle in some NBA stuff. And we got a good topic today that we're going to go into, and so we're going to get into that. Obviously, coming up here probably in the next week or two, we will have our NBA podcast that we have every year. Yeah, I think we've done 2 now before. This will be the 3rd, I believe. I think so. But we'll have my brother back like we have the last 2. So he'll be here doing that. And we'll get into that. That'll be a full episode on its own. But as of now, we're just going to give that little blurb at the end. And I think y'all going to like it. Well, some of y'all going to like it. Some of y'all not going to like it. Depend on probably the year of your birth. But look, as always, you know how we get this started. We get it started with the wine, man. So I know the last 2 weeks I had the same wine. This one we back to normal, new wine. And this one, interesting name, is called Roosevelt Riding a Moose. And it's literally Teddy Roosevelt riding a moose in the water. I don't know if that's a historically accurate picture or not. That's what it is. But this is a Primitivo. For those of y'all who don't know, it's a Primitivo is essentially like an Italian Zinfandel. And look, man, really, really good wine. So it's what I got right here. I'll be sipping it throughout the pod, as y'all know. But man, I get this one about 8.1, 8.2 out of 10. It's you get a lot of like dark berries. It's really like, for lack of a better term, it's like juicy when you get it. And so you get juicy, you get dark berries, and then a little bit of like vanilla at the end, but very full bodied, very smooth. This is definitely going into the rotation as a wine that I will have on deck just to sip while I'm watching NFL, NBA. This will probably be one that I'll start bringing over to, if we doing a little dinner or something with some friends, this will be one I grab. And so not too bad, about $18, really good value for it. And so definitely recommend trying this one out. And look, man, we're going to get right into it. And so week 8 recap, and we are going to start off, man, in the North. NFC, AFC. We got Baltimore at Chicago. Baltimore taking it 30-16. And look, if you are a Chicago fan, man, I'm not going to touch too much on the Baltimore side of it because Lamar was ruled out the day before. And I'm not going to lie to you, when I got that bet in on the Raven, or on the Bears, I think it was, plus 6.5. Or, yeah, I think it was what it was. I'd have to check. When I got my bet in, the assumption was Lamar was playing, and I was feeling really good. I was thinking, well, this is going to be some easy money, especially after I saw the line movement. And then the Bears, man, look, tough day. And so this is really disheartening if you're a Bears fan, because you're talking about a team where you finally had some momentum rolling. Caleb was, looked like he was starting to get it. The offense was starting to flow a little bit. Defense was playing better. Looked like Ben Johnson found a groove. Then you come up into a game against the Ravens, who, let's be honest, man, the Ravens, I know the last couple of weeks has been really, their defense has kind of made a little shift, but defense has been real gettable these last couple, or this year, one of the worst in the league. And then you come into the game with no Lamar. Now maybe if you're a Bears, that subconsciously kind of, you get that little deep breath, like, okay, we don't got Lamar, but then Tyler Huntley comes in and lights y'all up. And again, I said it last week. I thought that this was a big time momentum game for the Bears. I think a win this last week would have kind of jettisoned them, propelled them, and kept them on that right trajectory to be a playoff team. And I think now, with a loss like this, it's just, I think it's a couple things, right? Obviously, Ben Johnson, it's his first year. There's going to be growing pains, but I think part of this is just really kind of taking a step back. And look, I was very high on him coming in, but it's time to kind of really take a step back and look at Caleb Williams as far as, what he is as a quarterback and what his kind of ceiling is. Now, I mean, look, we see it every week. He makes one or two of these just absolutely incredible throws, but we've seen a lot of guys come into this league who can make incredible throws who don't end up being superstar quarterbacks. And so, again, I think it's time, if you're a Bears fan, if you're a Caleb fan like I was, just kind of time to pump the brakes. We're a year and a half in. Now, look, he may just be a little bit slower of a starter. We all know he's got all the tools. He's got the mobility. He's got the arm. He's got the arm talent. It's really just putting it all together. But when you see guys like Jaden Daniels have the year he had last year, you see guys like Drake May who's having the year he's having this year. Right now, if the season were to end, probably an MVP, probably the MVP. You look at, and I'm not high on him, but you look at a Bo Nix where you see him getting the wins, him flashes of good quarterback play, which you're getting from Caleb. But if you're Caleb, the goal is not to be on par with Bo Nix. And so, again, maybe it just takes him a little while. We've seen a lot of guys now. We're looking at, a Sam Darnold, a Baker Mayfield, a Geno, where, it's just, it takes them a few years before they really kind of get settled in. And maybe that's what you're looking at. But again, I think this was a game where I think it really could have. It's almost, to me, it felt like two trajectories for the season. A win kind of propels you into that playoff picture, and a loss, I think, is almost, I could see it being debilitating for this team, and you could maybe start to see a spiral. And so it'll be interesting to see, how they come out in this next game. Let me see, who are they playing? The Bengals. Look, playing the Bengals, a team that's gettable. And so I think this is a big spot as far as that offense. You really need to come out there and you really need to have a great game against a defense that teams can put points up against. And so, again, for Baltimore, I mean, it's pretty simple. Like I said, I'm not going to touch on them too much, but I mean that win could have been season saving. We'll see what happens tonight, obviously, with Baltimore playing Miami, but yeah, that, and I guess, well, by the time y'all watch this episode, it's going to be Friday. So I'm recording this Thursday. But yeah, so we'll see, how that game shakes out with Lamar playing. I assume they probably romp the Dolphins. And we'll talk about that game as well. But again, I think that, that may have saved the Ravens season as far as them being able to kind of fight and claw their way back into that playoff picture, barring Lamar's health and that defense's health. But look, man, we're gonna move over now to let's stay in the North. Another AFC NFC North matchup. We got the Packers and the Steelers. Man, we got Aaron Rodgers back in Green Bay, facing his old team. And look, this game, I'm going to be honest with you, it somewhat kind of played out how I saw it. Like I said, I thought that the Packers could disrupt what Aaron and that offense have been doing as far as those quick throws. And you did see that a little bit. And look, you saw when that did happen, that Packers D line and Micah Parsons caused a lot of trouble for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers still made some great throws, and it's actually been one of the more surprising things this year as far as the play they've gotten out of Rodgers. Because look, this Steelers defense has just been bad. And so, obviously the Packers, very talented offense, but I think the big story here is it's got to be with the Steelers and this defense. And look, I talked about it some last year and got some pushback from a lot of people as far as, maybe is it time for the Steelers and Mike Tomlin to part ways? And here's what I'll say, because when you're talking about this Steelers defense, you're talking about Mike Tomlin. Now, Mike Tomlin is a defensive coach, and much like any coach with your side of the ball, if resources are allocated to that, it should be a top of the line offense or defense. And if resources aren't allocated to that, you should be able to, if you're, considered one of the best at what you do, which I believe Mike Tomlin is as far as a defensive coach, but you should be able to take that side of the ball and outperform the talent that you have. And what we're seeing with this Steelers team is they're the highest paid defense by far, with a lot of big names on it. And it's Mike Tomlin's side of the ball. And typically, if you add those elements together, you would be looking at a top 3 at worst defense in the league. And instead, what you're getting is a bad defense. And so, again, to be allocating all those resources to the defensive side of the ball and it not be good, you're asking that offense to do a lot and Aaron Rodgers to do a lot. And to his credit, he's doing a lot and a lot more than I expected. But it's also one of the reasons why it's hard to take the Steelers seriously as a contender, and why I think it's very possible you see the Ravens chase them down, because with a defense that's not very good and all your money going to that side of the ball, you're just very limited on offense. And where do we see that at? In the Steelers O-line, which is why it's a lot of quick hitters for Rodgers, and when it's not, it's typically not been great. And so, again, I mean, I'm not one to sit here and ask for, or tell, I'm not one to sit here and say, they need to fire a coach. Like I said, I think maybe parting ways could be a thing that I could see happening that could be beneficial for both sides. And let me not say I don't. That's that fire a coach thing, obviously excluding Sirianni, because we all know he needs to be fired. But anyways, but no. So I think that, just with that Steelers defense, with those resources, they have to be better if the Steelers want any chance of winning that division and, being up in contention for winning a playoff game or two. And look, as far as the Packers, man, dominating win. It's the kind of win I feel like a lot of us expected when we saw this team coming in after week 1. Offense is rolling. Jordan Love has done he's still obviously throws those 50-50 balls up and hopes his guys come down with them. Again, I think that is a recipe where you can't get away with that multiple times against multiple great defenses, which you'll likely be facing in the playoffs, which is still why I'm a little hesitant on if they can win a Super Bowl or not. But look, when everything's rolling for that offense and that defense, they are a scary team, and they can really, really, they can beat anybody in the league on any day. And so, look, they stay a scary team, but again, we'll just have to kind of see if, that Steelers team can pick it up, and if the Packers, man, if they can keep it up, because we have seen them with a few letdown spots so far. Next up, man, let's go out to the NFC East. We have you know what? Let's go here. We're gonna go to the Broncos and the Cowboys, actually. And so, look, Broncos dismantle the Cowboys 44-24. And man, look, I think the biggest question here is, when you're looking at these two teams and just how they've been discussed, how I've discussed them, how they've been discussed on just the national media, the real question here is, was this more about the Broncos offense and the Broncos having a big game, or is this more about a Cowboys letdown? And to me, the answer is a Cowboys letdown, which is also kind of odd because if as y'all have listened to me this season, you know that I'm not very big on the Cowboys. I'm not very high on them, but and look, their offense played fine against a Broncos defense that's the Broncos have one of the best defenses in the league. Cowboys put up 24 on them. Obviously, left a lot on the field, but when you're talking about a team in the Cowboys where offensively they rank either first or second in every major category, and defensively they rank last or second to last in every major category. We've seen that Sean Payton, Bo Nix, that Denver offense can take advantage of bad defenses. What we haven't seen is them really have a complete game against a good defense, which is why to me it's more so about the Cowboys than the Broncos, because really we just saw what we kind of expected. I will say I did not expect 44 points, and I thought the Cowboys would be able to outscore them because I didn't trust the Broncos offense that much. But the Broncos have shown that they can tear up bad defenses, and you're looking at one of the worst. And so to me, this doesn't really move me very much with the Broncos as far as moving them up or kind of putting them into a space where I didn't already have them, as far as kind of just a solid team, probably going to be a wild card team, bumped in the first round probably. But it does very much change me on a Cowboys team where I thought, I mean, look, they're still scary because of that offense, because they can go out and put up 40 on anybody and on any given day. But it's hard to believe in a team where I thought the Cowboys initially maybe could be a wild card team, sneak in. It's hard for me to see this offense or this defense holding up enough to let the offense get those wins. And similar to what we saw. It all it takes is one good defense or one bad day from the offense, and it's a loss, and it's an ugly loss. And so to me, more about the Cowboys. Like I said, I kind of was starting to come around of like maybe they could be in the playoffs, spoil somebody in a first round. I just don't see it happening. Next, man, we're going to move over to the Patriots. And so, look, Patriots dominating win over the Browns, 32-13. And look, it's enough of a sample size now that the Patriots have to be taken seriously. And look, the move to bring Vrabel in obviously paid off huge. Josh McDaniels coming in as the OC obviously paid off huge. You have Drake May, who, has kind of launched himself into the MVP conversation and probably leads it right now. And look, I mean, it's if you're a Patriots fan, you had to go into the wilderness for 4 or 5 years, whatever it was. But now it looks like you may have the quarterback of the future who can go toe to toe with just about any quarterback in the league. You have a great coach. You have a really good defense. And look, for all the reasons why Stephon Diggs was moved on from the Bills, why the Bills move on from Stephon Diggs, it is the complete opposite from what he's providing the Patriots. Stephon is providing leadership for them, and it's just perfect for this young quarterback, this offense that's young. And look, I think, again, I thought I had them in the playoffs initially. I think they have a very legitimate chance of winning this division right now, especially if you can continue getting this kind of play from the quarterback. Yeah, I think, I don't know if they're a contender, at least not yet, but we'll see, man. We'll see how they kind of go out throughout the year. But I definitely think right now they're a team that I would not want to play in the playoffs. Next, man, we'll go over to the Chiefs as they continue to roll, man. 28-7 win over Washington. Um, Look, I know what everybody's going to say, especially once I roll out this top five. Spoiler alert: Chiefs are still at number one. They're going to say, "Oh, 7-7 at halftime," which yes, 7-7 at halftime. Courtesy of one really bad pick, or not even a really bad pick. I'm going to say by Mahomes, but one incredible play and a little ill-advised throw by Mahomes, and Lattimore picked it, and then another pick that right off the hands. Can't blame Mahomes for that one, but it happened. But so while I know it was 7 points at half to the Commanders, it the yards they put up in that first half, I can't imagine Mahomes making those kind of mistakes repeatedly. So to me, it's a little bit whatever. But then to come out and score 21 unanswered in the second half, I mean, it just it shows kind of the Chiefs are getting back to that team that was probably at its scariest, and I would argue is scarier than ever when you look at the fact of right now they are number 2 in scoring defense, not by much. And so you have a top 2 defense. Depending on the metrics, you have a top 5 offense. I think right now in scoring they're 7, but yards they're in the top 5. It's quarterback by Mahomes. This again might be one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous Chiefs team in the last however many years. And all those years they went to the Super Bowl. So to me, right now, again, it's just them continuing to show that they're the most complete team. Last 2 weeks, they've allowed 7 points. And you can say, oh, well, that was to the Raiders and the Commanders without Jaden Daniels. We talk every week. You'll hear it on national media every week about, oh, it's a rivalry game, even though this team is bad, division game. They're always tough. They rolled the Raiders. And then again, yes, Marcus Mariota was the quarterback for the Commanders and only scored 7 points. But coming into that, everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of national media talking about, look, Marcus Mariota might be the best backup in the league, or one of the best backups, one of the best situations for a backup quarterback in the Commanders. And so, look, they had all their weapons still and scored 7 points against that defense. So, again, to me, Chiefs just keep rolling. And again, it's just they're looking like the scariest team again. And then lastly, man, we are going to go to Eagles and Giants, man. Eagles getting a big win, 38-20 against the Giants. And the reason I wanted to do this one last is because we're going to talk about A.J. Brown some. But first off, we just got, look, Philly finally played a really good game against the Giants. But look, like I just said, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the Chiefs and Raiders game being divisional and how divisional games are always tough. Same thing. And this is a Giants team that already came out, beat Philly. Unfortunate, man, obviously, with the Scadaboo injury, never want to see that. So hopefully he's back playing, again next year, healthy. So, obviously wish him the best. But look, this is probably the best the Eagles looked. And I know you still gave up 20 points to the Giants, but is hands down the best the Eagles have looked. Big time plays on defense, big time plays on offense. Saquon finally had this breakout game that we've all kind of been waiting for all year. Obviously still got to build on it. One great week of 4 quarters of both sides of the ball does not breed confidence in me when we're 8 weeks in, but it's a spot to build on. And so, it looks like they have started to open up the offense a little more for Jalen over the last couple of weeks. And again, I think we have to have Saquon doing what he does. Obviously, we'll see if he can get back to last year's form, or if, this is more so the one off that he's going to have every once in a while. And he's more so what we've seen for the last 7 weeks, which is kind of my guess and my fear. But look, great win nonetheless. And so, look, again, something to build on. But notably, the one person that was not there in that win when everything looked great was AJ Brown. And, I kind of postulated when it was first ruled that he was going to be out, or when it was first mentioned that he didn't practice. And I didn't see why. I just saw AJ Brown, non-participant at practice. And I texted one of my boys, a couple of my boys who are Eagles fans, and say, why isn't AJ practicing? Because last time we had seen AJ was on week 7, catching the very last play of the game to ice the game. So, I'm thinking, okay, well, like, that's kind of weird, and obviously you were healthy throughout the whole game, and, who knows, maybe something. So they text me back hamstring. I'm like, okay, maybe, on that last play, or, adrenaline throughout the game doesn't really hit you until after the game. That's normal. But it also kind of got me thinking, I'm like, is it a hamstring or is it like hamstring? And so you have that obviously because after the games, we're getting these cryptic kind of posts and things like that. And then this article comes out. And I think it was by The Athletic. And look, if you haven't read the article, if you're an Eagles fan especially, I highly recommend you read it. It's a great article. And it really gives you a lot of insight into AJ Brown and his feelings, and, you know, why you can see the things that he's been doing. And again, I speculated he probably has asked for a trade already, probably asked for a trade a couple times since in the last, 12 months. But it really gives you a look at, because I think, right or wrong, I think a lot of people and Eagles fans, especially when they see just kind of how he's moved with kind of the situation, especially this year where he's not getting those numbers. And I think a lot of Eagles fans and just kind of people who have been following it will say it's a selfish kind of thing. And what I'll say to you is, in this article, he explains how and look, it's not just him talking, it's people in the organization talking about probably the hardest worker in the locker room. And he talks about how when he's putting in all this work, obviously he wants the team to win. But if he's going to put in all that work, he wants to be a part of the reason for winning, because he thinks that if he's part of the reason for winning, they have a better chance of winning. And look, it's something if you're an athlete, I feel like you can definitely relate to it. And from a standpoint of, just like I said, when you put that much into it, and anyone who's an athlete, or and it doesn't really even have to be an athlete. Anybody, if in whatever you really really enjoy, whenever you put all your hard work and you are one of the hardest workers in whatever you're doing, whenever you're doing that but not getting kind of the recognition, we'll say here, or in AJ's case, the targets or whatever, that can be very frustrating, even if you're part of a unit that's doing well. And so again, man, look, this article goes into, kind of his life in the locker room prior to the NFL, family stuff, goes into being his friends, which he, in this article, crazy, he says he doesn't have any friends. He has, people in the locker rooms, teammates that he loves, things like that, but does not have any friends. And so again, I think it gives you a real insight into one, the things that drove him to become an NFL wide receiver and become as great as he is are the same things that are still driving him now, which again, I think is why people can perceive it as selfish. But in his case, and like I said, anybody who's been competitive in anything can understand that where, you know, when you're trying to be the best and you're putting in the work and it's what you've done to get to where you are, it's hard. You can't turn that off. And so, man, look, great article. To whoever wrote it in the Athletic, yo, shout out to you. Like I said, I definitely would recommend reading that. Um, and look, like I said, I think again, I don't think again, trade deadline coming up. I don't think AJ will get moved. I'm sure he's asked to be moved a few times. The dead cap money is a real issue with it. And so I just can't see because I can't see the Eagles taking on any kind of draft compensation or anything like that. And I can't see anything out there that would be enough to get back for the Eagles player wise to make them want to move AJ and take on the dead cap money. So my guess is he's probably here this year, maybe moved next year. But um, yeah, definitely interesting. Definitely wanted to touch on that some because, like I said, I thought it was a really great article. All right, man. Next, we are going to go ahead into our week 9 look ahead. And, this week, not too many games that I really have my eye on. There's a couple really good ones. Obviously, we'll get into them. But right now, only got 4 of them. 4 games that we're really looking ahead to in this week that I feel are big matchups that are really worth diving into. And so, first one, look, we talked about it earlier tonight. Ravens Dolphins. To me, man, again, just to kind of piggyback on what I was saying earlier, as far as the Ravens saving their season last week with that win against the Bears. Look, this is another must win. Look, there's not many Ravens games moving forward that aren't going to be must win games because they've dug themselves in such a hole that, you're probably only looking at a 9-10 win season at best. But they got to do a lot of winning to end this season. And so, again, a must win against a Dolphins team who has been pretty awful this whole year, but last week showed a little bit of life when, I'll be honest, I thought they were done. I thought last week was going to just be nail in the coffin. You're going to get McDaniels firing. You're going to get a, possibly Tua benching, something extreme I thought would have happened after last week when I thought they were just going to get romped. And look, they came out and showed some life. So, shout out to them. And look, here's the thing. The Dolphins, even without Tyreek Hill, have a very explosive offense with Waddle, Achane. They got they still have, I know Waller's out who's been playing well, but they got another really good tight end. And again, just an explosive offense. And you got Mike McDaniel who draws up a good offense. So when you talk about the Ravens, going back to it, like I said, 2 weeks they've had a good defense, but it's a defense that's been very gettable. And so could I see a world in which the Dolphins, after showing some life, kind of rally and that offense really kicks into gear against a Baltimore team whose defense regresses back to what it's been for 6 of the 8 weeks this year? Yeah, I could. Do I think it's likely? I'd probably give it, a 20%, 25% chance of happening. I think the more likely result is the Ravens come out, roll, and the Dolphins used up kind of their surge of life, that last little bit of life last week. And it's going to be right back to the same old Dolphins that it's been all year. But again, with an offense that can get going against a defense that can get got, you never know. And like I said, this is a game the Ravens desperately need to win because it's this should be in theory one of the gimmies on their schedule moving forward. And look, as far as what to expect from Lamar tonight, man, look, been out a few weeks. I expect he's probably going to come out a little rusty. I would assume it's a little odd because obviously he was initially thought to be playing last Sunday and then ends up sitting out, which to me almost seems like he was probably around 85% or so, 80, 85%, 75 at the worst, cleared by everybody, but just wasn't quite right on Sunday, which gave him this last little bit of, these last other 4 days to get healthy. So I would assume he's probably going to come back pretty healthy, probably close to 90, 95, 100%. But I do think he's probably a little rusty, probably a little off, obviously not logging many practices over the last, 4 or 5 weeks, however long he's been out. So I would assume he'll be pretty rusty. I'll assume he also, depending on how the game is going, I would assume he probably, if they're in control, probably doesn't push it too much as far as running the ball. So probably see him throwing the ball a little bit more. Probably some off-target throws, just like I said, just kind of working his way back in. But that's kind of what I would expect from Lamar, just kind of as he works his way back in. Obviously, we'll see what happens if the Dolphins do end up taking a huge lead. Maybe he does have to open it up more, but from a standpoint of what you're probably hoping for if you're a Ravens fan, it's that you have control and he kind of is just escaping, using that mobility to escape some, but not really pushing that hamstring too much. And, kind of just early, maybe some off-target throws, but then really kind of finding his groove later. So that's what I think will probably end up happening. Like I said, I think that's probably about an 80% chance of happening for this game. And so, we'll see what happens. But again, definite must win for the Ravens here tonight. Next up, man, we got the Bears and the Bengals. And so, look, another team where, look, like I said, I thought last week could be a big trajectory game for the Bears. And this is going to show it. Bengals defense, a team and a defense that's very gettable, a team that you can go up and you can put big numbers up on, but also an offense that, if Joe Flacco is on that day with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, it's an offense that can really get going. So going to be a good test for the Bears defense. So to me, this has to be an offense game. If you are going to save your season at all, to me, you have to. Caleb has to have a great game. Ben Johnson has to call a really great game. Going to have to run the ball well. And so, like I said, to me, I think that this is really, if last week's game, if I'm right in the trajectory, it was a trajectory game, you'll probably see the Bears come out and lose. But again, if you're the Bears and you want to kind of cling on to, no, last week was an aberration. We were heading in the right direction. We are, we're going to be right there in the mix for the playoffs. Again, this is a game you have to win. If not, then yeah, I would almost be willing to put a large wager on the fact that they will not even make the playoffs, and that they won't even really be in the mix. And from the Bengals standpoint, you're still kind of just trying to ride out some wins until you can get Joe Burrow back, and hopefully the Ravens still trying to claw their way back in. The Steelers, I don't think are going to be a team that you can count on to continue winning games the rest of the year, especially when you look at their schedule. So, look, the Bengals are also looking at this division similarly to the Ravens, saying, oh, if we can just tread water, get a couple more wins, get Joe Burrow back, get him integrated in, we can win this division. And so, obviously a big game for both of them. And if you're either team, you're looking at the other team like, this is a game we should get. This is a very gettable game. We should have this game. Next, man, Broncos Texans, and so this is an interesting game because it's just best defense against great defense, and two offenses that at times look amazing and at times look really bad. And so my guess is we have a real ugly game here, but I think the winner of this game is going to show a lot of kind of who we can really kind of see making some noise in the AFC this year. I would argue that I kind of think it's going to be the Texans winning this game. That defense, I think, is just incredible. And I, like I said earlier with Bo Nix, I think that he hasn't shown the ability to play four good quarters against good teams and good defenses. So I can't imagine he's going to have four good quarters against the best defense in the league. And I just trust CJ Stroud more than I trust Bo Nix. And so to me, I think the Texans offense, obviously, like I said, I think it's going to be kind of a low scoring slugfest. I just trust that the Texans offense is going to get it rolling and keep it going a little bit more than the Broncos offense will. And I think this is going to be one of those games where afterwards we look at Bo Nix and we look at the Broncos and we say, yeah, I mean, it was against the Cowboys defense. Yeah, they kind of are what we probably got a little ahead of ourselves. They probably are what we thought that they were a few weeks ago when, they were having terrible three quarters of terrible offensive football and pulling it out at the end against solid defenses. And when they play good defenses and good teams, they can't really count on them. And so that's my guess of what we'll probably end up seeing from this game. And last, man, look, we got the game of the week probably. We got Chiefs and Bills. So Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. And we're going to start right there first just because, there was the soundbite of Jim Nance talking about, rivalries and how Patrick and Josh need each other. And I'm going to be one of the people to tell you that this isn't a rivalry. You got to beat a guy in the playoffs at least once for it to be a rivalry. You got a couple regular season wins, and every single year in the playoffs, you meet, you lose. And really only one of them has been kind of a game where you thought the Bills might win. And so, again, right now, I would probably argue that Patrick doesn't really have a rival in the NFL. If I was to say anybody, which it's kind of tough because it's opposite division, I'd probably say Jalen, to be honest, just because, met in two Super Bowls, won one, lost one. Jalen played incredible. Patrick's played incredible in one. Jalen's played incredible in really in both, but had the one big kind of game flipping turnover in the first one. And so I would say that, but again, it's hard with a rivalry for it to be in the opposite conference, right? Because yeah, you'll see each other, maybe once in the regular season, and that's really all you're kind of guaranteed. As far as in the AFC, again, I don't really think there's anybody. I don't really think there's anybody, period. But especially in the AFC, when you're talking about the only guy who's really beat Mahomes in the playoffs has been Joe Burrow, but we haven't seen him in the playoffs in 5 years or 4 years, however long it's been. And so yeah, to me, it's just it's kind of tough to, no shade at Jim Nance who said it, but it's not a rivalry. If it is, it's the most one-sided rivalry in all the sports because there's not a case you can make for Josh. It's not like when you talk about regular seasons, Mahomes has more MVPs. Mahomes has had the better overall regular seasons, when you talk about playoffs, Mahomes has the Super Bowls, Mahomes has all the wins in the playoffs. It's just Josh has an MVP, which it's again, it's just to me, it's a little ridiculous to think it's a rivalry. But as far as the game this week and who it means more for, I think this is to be honest, I think this is actually one of the few times in the last couple of years in the regular season where these two teams have met and both of them need the win. I think, when we've looked at the last few years when they've met in the regular season, it's, you know, Josh Allen, they're gonna win the division. Mahomes, they're gonna win the division. It's gonna be a great game. It's not really gonna tell us anything because we already know who wins in the playoffs. Bills win, people kind of hype them up saying they might be a problem, and then they lose in the playoffs. But again, it's just there's never really been any kind of stakes involved with their regular season games. Whereas I think this regular season game, it's actually really important for both of them. So I would say they both kind of equally need this. I think the Bills need it because they haven't beat a team with a winning record yet, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, yes, they come out and do they trounce bad teams? Yes, they do. But whenever the good teams they've played, they haven't been able to do that too. And so, one, I think it's going to be a great barometer for how good that Chiefs defense really is. Are we really looking at the number 2 defense in the league? Or is it, when they get to Josh Allen, great quarterback, he exposes them a little bit. But like I said, I mean, look, Buffalo needs it to prove they can win against a good team. They also need it just because the Patriots are rolling. And, it's very, very you can definitely see a world in which, if the Bills lose this game, they lose the division to the Patriots. And similarly on the Chiefs side, man, like, yes, do I have them as the number 1 team in the league right now? Yes. If they lose to the Bills, will I have them the number 1 team? No. Would probably be closer to 5 or so. But even with them, their record is still what, 4-3, 5-3, 5-3. But anyways, they're third in the division, and again, with a loss like this or losing to this game, you could see that being the reason that they maybe lose the division and are fighting for a wild card spot. And look, in this playoffs this year, a wild card spot is being that kind of number 1 wild card team is going to be very interesting because if the Steelers can hold on, you might be playing the Steelers in round 1 against that bad defense and against a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers with no pass protection. But you could also possibly be playing Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who are rolling because they would have had to be to get that number 1 seed, or Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, who also would be rolling because they would have to get that number 1 seed. So you really have a kind of spot where if you're that number 1 wild card team, you might look at it as a huge blessing, or it might be the worst thing that could have happened to you. And so obviously both of these teams would rather avoid possibly having to see a team like a Joe Burrow Bengals, Lamar Jackson Ravens on a huge win streak coming into the playoffs for their very first game in the playoffs. So again, needed for both of them. I think when you look at it, to me, the defense is what's going to set it apart. I think the Chiefs defense can do enough against Josh Allen and this Bills team. Whereas the Bills defense, I think the Chiefs probably roll. But again, it's just with these games, it's tough because it seems like the Bills win the regular season every year against the Chiefs, and it means nothing. But again, I think with the heightened stakes of kind of this game and the real foreseeable outcome of if you lose, you may be looking at a wild card spot. I think is going to be enough to kind of be that extra motivation the Chiefs need against a bad against a bad Bills defense and against a team that, again, like I said, the Bills who haven't been able to win against good teams. And with that, man, we are going to roll ahead into our top 5 of the week. So pushing into week 9, our top 5. Look, like I said, Chiefs stay at 1. To me, most complete team. Like I said, I think they're the only team that has both offense and defense in the top 5. So, um, or one of, I think they're one of 2. I think it's Colts and them, defense, offense in the top 5. And then you have Mahomes there, you have Andy Reid. Pretty clear to me. They look right now like the best complete team. Number 2, we are sticking with the Rams up there. Obviously, Puka cleared. Looks like he's going to be playing again. So Matt Stafford, who is having a great year with all his weapons back. The defense playing really well. Again, only real knock for them is their kicking, which obviously can be a big detriment. But, you know, if that's your worst thing, I think that's good enough to keep you at number 2. Number 3, moving up, Eagles, man. Look, great win. They put together a couple more like that. They're going to be 1-2 with the Chiefs, and kind of just have to see who's playing better at that point. But as of now, because there is still that lingering thought of inconsistency that they have, got to keep them at 3. But like I said, talent wise, could easily put them at 1. Number 4, Lions. Again, man, it's just, if you're a team that can get out in front of them early, like the Chiefs showed, then they're beatable. But if you can't do that, then it's hard to see a way to beat them. And so them at 4, and then look, moving up, number 5, we got the Packers. Again, I think when you look at this team, inconsistent, yes. Do I love the quarterback as far as making good decisions every game? No. But they're still, when everything is right, they're hard to argue a team better than them. And they're certainly right on par there with who I would consider, the top teams in the league. And so Packers at 5, look, just missing out. I know I really thought I was going to be putting the Patriots in the top 5 this week. Just couldn't quite get them there, but just outside the top 5, man, Patriots. So shout out to them. But yeah, that's our top 5. We got Chiefs, Rams, Eagles, Lions, Packers. And next, man, we got our bets for this week. So B's best bets, and I'm gonna be honest with y'all, rough week last week. I told y'all I didn't have 5 that I really, really loved. I probably only had 3. And of those 3, one of them hit. We went 1-4. Tough week. Puts us 4-6 on the season. We obviously had the Niners plus 1.5 versus Texans. That was a loss. Cincinnati minus 6.5 versus the Jets. That was a loss. Bears plus 6.5 versus the Ravens. That felt really good. That was a loss. Cowboys plus 3.5 versus the Broncos. Never a chance. And Packers minus 3 versus Steelers. Easy money. But look, this week we're gonna try to win some money back. So I will also tell y'all, I also did place a bet on Dodgers winning World Series. Game 3 was that? Yeah, 3. I placed a live bet on that just to get some money back, as well as a Travis Kelce over 3.5 catches and a touchdown. So I won all my money back. But I digress. Look, this week, man, we are going with Colts -3 versus the Steelers. To me, again, I just think that Steelers defense is gettable. Colts are absolutely rolling. If the Colts were to not cover this 3 or lose this game, it would. And look, it would really question as far as what I feel about them. And if y'all noticed, I had them in the top 5 last week. I do not. I made a decision that I just still do not actually fully believe in Daniel Jones. So I know the rest of their team is incredible. Jonathan Taylor, also a good pick as far as if you wanted to choose somebody for MVP right now. My man is balling. But yeah, it's just I really last week I tried to convince myself and I let the record get to me. I'm not doing it this week. So that's why the Colts ain't in the top 5. But we are taking a -3 versus Steelers. Next, man, we got the Bengals +2.5 versus the Bears. Um, it's hard for me to trust that offense, the Bears offense. Next one, we got Jags -3 versus the Raiders. I had the Raiders as a playoff team. That has looked very bad, like a very, very bad pick. And I just look, to me, it's almost one of the things where I feel like Jacksonville needs this win. Like they know they need this win. You got to come out and stomp the Raiders. Next one, I got Cowboys -2.5 versus the Cardinals. This one is pretty straightforward. If Kyler's playing, the new Call of Duty's out. If he's not playing, I know Jacoby Brissett has been great, but I just trust that Cowboys offense to bounce back in a game that has where the Cowboys now have lowered expectations. I just feel like the Cowboys play better when they have no expectations. And then lastly, Seahawks -3 versus the Commanders. Look, I think this is a game that the Commanders' secondary could get really exposed with the Seahawks' weapons. And I think that Seahawk defense is really, really good. The thought is Jaden Daniels will be playing, but that defense, Jaden Daniels on, maybe a hobbled hamstring. I'm going to take the Seahawks -3. So just to recap real quick, we have Colts -3, Bengals +2.5, Jags -3, Cowboys -2.5, Seahawks -3. That looks like, I'm going to say, a 5-0 week, 4-1 at the worst, and we are back in above 500. Well, man, look, that wraps up all of our NFL stuff for the week. And now we are going to go ahead and move into, like I said, the NBA and one specific topic, really, like I said, we're going to start getting back into the NBA, kind of giving some analysis on the games. Obviously, we're going to definitely talk some about Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs. Going for, I think it's a franchise best start if they win tonight. And he's been balling. Obviously, OKC still rolling. Shea picking up right where he left off. But the topic we are going to cover today, and it's why I said that depending on your birth year is going to depend on how you feel about it, because we're going to talk about load management in relation to Michael Jordan's comments on it on the NBC, one interview he's done that is now just kind of mini series. And so load management, first of all, I know we all hate it. It's just kind of what it is. I think, well, let's get into what MJ said. MJ, first of all, said he's not a fan of load management. I don't really think anybody is, but, for whatever reason, I don't think anybody's shocked by that. But it's just interesting because, the reason he gave is, I always thought, if there was somebody in the stands who this is their only chance to see me, I didn't want to, not play, blah, 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 blah. That's essentially, the Cliff Notes version of it. He said, I always wanted to be available for, the fans. You're playing 2.5 hours of basketball, 3 hours of basketball. That's your job. What I'll say is, because obviously you have all the Jordan nostalgic lovers on social media who are talking about, see, this is Jordan didn't load manage because of the fan, blah 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 blah. First of all, I'm going to remind you that Michael Jordan retired and came back twice. So, while yes, Michael, look, when he was, game 48 Tuesday night in Indiana, yep, Mike was going to be there. But that's also the same guy who missed years of games when clearly he could play. So, my point here is right message, wrong messenger. Because you load managed for seasons at a time. Now, if this would have been John Stockton, who I think of available games he could have played, he missed 7. It's not actually 7, but it's something crazy. I think it's like 18 or something. Karl Malone, who for 19 seasons basically played 82 games. If that was your messenger here, understandable. But for all you Jordan fans out here talking about, Jordan, see, he hates load management, blah, 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 blah. He load managed for full seasons. He retired and came back twice. So I don't want to hear, see, Jordan didn't load manage. Because you give a guy a couple years off, halfway in his career. And then again, towards the end, yeah, you could probably play some more if you're not, putting your body through an NBA season consecutively every year. Next, what I'll say, because again, for a lot of these, I'm going to lean towards most of them are older, most of them are Jordan fans. However, I understand some of them are not. Some people just do not understand. When you're bringing up load management in relation to players that are playing right now. So I'll give you the couple that you always hear. Obviously, Kawhi, Joel Embiid, and from a very select group of people, you'll hear LeBron. So what I'll tell you is, one, LeBron doesn't load manage. Does he miss games here and there with some nagging stuff? Sure. Not really load management. If you want to say him missing games when he's 41, being that he's played the most games, most minutes, most everything in the NBA ever, I think at that point, anyone who wanted to see him could have seen him. And so again, at that age, I'm not really going to say anything. Let's set LeBron aside. The other two people that people really get upset about, Kawhi and Joel. And look, I've been against Kawhi, and I am a huge Sixers fan and a huge Joel fan. But you're talking about two guys who quite literally have degenerative issues with their knees, meaning they quite literally cannot play a full 82 games. Now, you also couple this with right now, if you look, and this is data that is tracked, at the amount of movement, cutting, running that players do now, it is exponentially more. I'm talking. I believe the actual numbers are more than double the amount now than they were doing in the 80s and 90s. Now, reason for that being is I know a lot of you Jordan guys and old people, older people love to talk about how great the 90s game was. Go back and watch that, because when you do, what you'll see is a lot of standing around on the outside, dumping it into the big man, and that's about it. You'll see some movement, but it's a very um in comparison now to the game, it is a very kind of slow paced game. And part of that is, the outside shooting wasn't there. And so when you factor in most shots were taken around the rim or mid range jumpers, it doesn't, the defense didn't have to respect out as far, which means there's a lot less space, which means just not a lot of space to cut and run and all those things. Whereas when you consider now, you look at these teams and you're having to pick guys up 3-4 feet above the 3-point line. Well, that then gives you a lot more space. So when you obviously get by your initial defender, help defense, rotations. If you look at the game now defensively, I know not everybody, I know a lot of these people like to talk about how the defense now is so much, they don't play defense. The truth is, if you really, we could pull any clip. If you watch an NBA game now, the amount of defensive rotations is exponentially more than you would ever see in a 90s game. And so, again, when you couple the amount of running, cutting, jumping, pace, all of that now compared to the 90s, players are just putting a lot more wear on their body. Now, yes, in the 90s, I know the defense was way harder. And, if you went to the air, you were getting clotheslined out. Let's be honest. Yes, there are clips of that. But it was far from an every night thing. And there's reasons why we see a few of these same exact clips over and over. It's because there's not 1,000 of them. There's a handful of them, which is why they're played over and over. So, yes, was the game more physical? Sure. You can make an argument that yes, you could, because you were out of position and you weren't as athletic, you were allowed to then be a little bit more physical when somebody came to the paint. Sure. But again, when you're talking about things like joints, things like that, the running, the cutting, the amount that the exponential amount more they're doing now leads to, a more understandable reason of needing to load manage. And then lastly, here's what I'll say. For all of you who are blaming the players for load management, it's time that you learned about how this really works. While, yes, NBA players do have, a certain amount more power than a lot of other athletes, most of them, if not all of them, who want to load manage or who are load managed, do not want to load manage. Load management, if you want somebody to be angry at, go yell at your GM, go yell at your owner, go yell at your training staff, because they're the ones making that decision. And it's real easy to understand if you want to. These players are an investment by owners. If I'm investing 5 years, $200 million, I want them, if I have to sacrifice 10, 12 games a year to make sure you're playing at what the trainers perceive as your best for 70 games a year, and you might have a lower risk of injury, I'm going to protect my investment as the owner. If I'm the GM, My job is to win championships. We see a lot of GMs, a lot of coaches who have great regular season, don't win championships. So my goal is to win the championship. So I don't care about a random Wednesday night in Indiana. No offense to Indiana, I know I've used you twice, but I don't care about it. My goal is to make sure my best players are at as optimal as they can be for the playoffs. And so my trainers now, because if y'all don't know, a lot of these NBA guys, if not all of them, have everything tracked. Well, not most of them. All these NBA guys have everything tracked as far as how much they've run, how much they've jumped, the impact they're doing, all of that. And the trainers and the doctors look at all that and say, "Oh, yep, they can only withstand this much in a week. So you have this much to offer. Once we hit that, we'll give them a rest." So again, I just feel like this load management thing where, and like I said, I know it's heavily driven by a specific sector of fans to push a narrative of either this era not being as good and their era being better, or a specific player who we don't even need to name because we all know not being as good as their favorite player. And so again, it's very, very simple, and it's very easy to look up and know and learn about these things, but it's not the players making this decision, guys. So if you want somebody to be angry at, go get on Twitter, X, whatever, and yell at your team owner, yell at your coach, yell at your trainers, yell at your GM. And if you're going to do a load management segment, get somebody who didn't load manage for seasons. But no, anyways, look, appreciate y'all as always, man. That's all we got to say on that. But look, as always, like, subscribe, hit the notification button so you know when I'm dropping new episodes. Like I said, coming weekly, we're gonna have a one here. Probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll have 2 episodes. One being that NBA special. As always, man, I appreciate y'all. Look, go out, get some wine, enjoy it, enjoy the sports this week, and we're gonna see y'all next week.